as if the act could change the facts. In the living room, the framed drawing, 5 figures, 4 small crowns, 1 woman with yellow hair, caught the porch light and turned it into a lighthouse flicker. He remembered then the last phone call from his wife, Eliza, a decade compressed into a minute he could play on demand. She'd sounded tired in that tender, satisfied way of a day almost done. "The nurse is wonderful," she'd said, warmth traveling across cell towers like it knew the way. "Young, careful, I feel safe." He'd teased her in the old language of their marriage, mock threats to storm the ward and demand a bigger pillow, anything to tilt the conversation toward ordinary. "Promise me," she'd whispered, suddenly serious, "that if I can't walk all of this with you, you'll make room for kindness anyway. Not perfect, kind." He'd promised because promises feel like rope you can hold. Hours later, there had been sirens and a sunrise that refused to mean what sunrises are supposed to mean. He had put her handkerchief, cream fabric, tiny stitched initials EEHM, into his pocket and learned how to be 3 people's sure. Now, with Nora's letter open in front of him, he felt the old pain move through his chest and then do a surprising thing. It made space. A thought arrived, simple and immovable. The girls had been safe because 3 miracles had happened in terrible sequence. And somewhere in that sequence, a young nurse had done her job with a heart that had never forgiven itself. He stood and found the handkerchief where he always kept it, in the small drawer by the door with spare keys and a roll of tape. He tucked it into his coat. The rain was a fine mist by then, like the sky was practicing being gentle. He left a note for the babysitter he texted in emergencies and stepped back out into the weather. 3 blocks over, the bus stop held its usual company. An advertisement peeling at the corner, a gumblot map on the concrete, a pair of pigeons with diplomacy issues. Nora sat on the metal bench with her coat wrapped tight and her hair darkened by rain to a deeper gold. Her hands were clasped the way people hold themselves together when it's not polite to fall apart. Caleb approached quietly and lifted the umbrella over both of them. For a heartbeat, the rain sounded like applause on the nylon canopy. She looked up and the apology flooded her face before the words could. "I'm sorry," she said, voice hoarse like someone had turned down the treble on her throat. "I didn't mean to come into your home and then I didn't know." He sat beside her, not crowding, umbrella angled like a roof you could still see stars through. He took out the handkerchief and offered it without explanation. She turned it in her shaking hands, eyes catching on the initials. "Eliza Hart Mercer," he said. "It's the last thing of hers I kept close. It's clean and it's yours for right now." "I didn't kill her," Nora whispered, stare fixed on a point where streetlight met wet pavement, making a halo nobody had earned. "But I didn't stop it either. I was the one who signed. I was new and it was quiet, and she wanted to go home and feel like she belonged somewhere other than the edge of hospital sheets, and I said yes. I've been trying to sign better yeses and better nos ever since." Tears jacketed her lashes, the kind that come with no drama, just gravity. "How can I love them or you when I'm the reason they never met their mother?" Caleb let the question hang, because some questions need air before they can hear their own answers. "She told me about you," he said finally. "Not your name. She didn't get to that. But the shape of you. She said you were gentle. She said she felt safe. That's the last word she gave me, safe." He felt her breath catch beside him. "If you think you were wrong then," he continued, "you can spend the next 50 years paying penance to the wrong part of the story. Or you can stay and let the right part get bigger. Not for me, for yourself. For 3 little girls who already know how your heartbeat sounds from the inside of a hug." She made a sound that wasn't quite a sob and wasn't quite a laugh. The sound people make when grace ambushes them. He didn't reach for her until she reached the smallest inch toward him first. Then he put an arm around her shoulders with the caution and commitment of a man who has carried priceless, breakable things and learned that most of them are not glass. She leaned into him, not to disappear, but to rest. The rain thinned further, a courtesy. Across the street, a baker flipped a sign from open to "See you tomorrow," and the world kept insisting on continuing. They walked back in a quiet that felt like a pact. The umbrella tapped once, twice, a metronome for their newly shared stride. At the gate, Caleb paused because thresholds deserve respect. "We don't have to decide everything tonight," he said. We don't ever have to decide everything at once." She nodded, eyes searching the windows where warm squares of light made the rooms look like promises. When he opened the door, the sound that met them could have mended bone. "Miss Nora!" Junie's voice skittered down the stairs like a loose marble. Footsteps thundered in the unthreatening way of children allowed to be delighted. Ava arrived first, hair wild from sleep, crown of paper askew. Pearl, always a beat behind by choice, came carefully, her face preparing itself for disappointment out of muscle memory and then not needing the practice. They collided with Nora's knees and waist and arms, that choreography of reunions where nobody asks permission because the body already gave it. "I knew you'd come back," Ava declared, like a queen signing a decree. "We saved you a cookie," Pearl whispered, conspiratorial, as if the promise itself could hold a person fast. Junie pressed a small, sticky object into Nora's palm, a star sticker, gold and slightly torn. "For bravery," she said. Nora knelt so her words would land at eye level and therefore closer to the truth. "I went to the bus stop," she told them. "And then your dad came and reminded me that sometimes the bus isn't the way home." She glanced up at Caleb. The look had a lot in it. Thanks, fear, relief, a thin new thread of trust. She turned back to the girls. "If it's all right with your hearts, I'd like to stay tonight." 3 heads bobbed so vigorously the crowns threatened again to mutiny. Pearl pressed her ear to Nora's chest as if to check the equipment. Whatever she heard satisfied her. She closed her eyes in the full-body agreement of a child finally allowed to stop guarding the door. They moved as a cluster into the living room, where a blanket still held the shape of earlier reading. Caleb flicked on the lamp with the shade the girls had painted daisies onto last spring. Thumbprint petals, yellow centers. The house exhaled. Nora settled on the couch with the gravity of someone taking a seat in her own name for the first time in a long while. Ava climbed into the crook of her arm like it had been reserved. Junie tucked her feet under Nora's thigh and draped a doll across both of them with an authority that suggested custody had been granted. Pearl curled at Nora's side and threaded her fingers through the hem of the cardigan like she was learning Braille. Caleb stood for a breath longer than necessary, watching the frame assemble. 4 beings at rest on a couch that had hosted every version of his life, and now this one. He sat at the edge, within reach, without crowding. "Tomorrow," he said lightly, as though speaking into a room that had learned to trust gentle forecasts, "is pancakes, and library hour if we're feeling bold." "Library hour is always bold," Ava murmured, already sliding into sleep. Nora felt something inside her, an old alarm, a reflex to flee, toggle off. She had expected penance. She had braced for banishment. Instead, she had been handed a handkerchief, an umbrella, a homecoming. She looked at the mantel where the photograph of Eliza stood in its simple frame, the one where sunlight turned her hair into a mercy. Nora rose, walked over, and set the gold star sticker on the bottom corner of the glass. "Thank you," she whispered, a message for the past that didn't need a reply to be received. Caleb watched her do it and felt the knot he'd kept carefully tied for years loosen without undoing the rope. He thought of Eliza's last request, make room for kindness, and understood, finally, that kindness does not replace what was loved. It lets what was loved be joined by something that will, in time, be loved too. When the girls were finally transferred from couch to beds with the tender logistics they required, Nora stood in the doorway of their room and took in the full panorama. 3 small bodies trusting the world enough for now to close their eyes. "Will you still be here when we wake up?" Pearl asked into the dark, voice already slipping under. Nora didn't hesitate. "Yes, baby," she said. "Mom," she paused, the word catching like a stitch snagging and then, with care, sliding free. "Nora is home." She felt Caleb's presence at her shoulder and, without looking, reached back. His hand found hers, and their fingers laced the way you do when you mean to hold on through several kinds of weather. Downstairs, the letter remained on the table, not erased by the night's forgiveness, not filed away, simply part of the story now, a page that had to be written so the next one could exist. The rain had stopped. Somewhere a wind chime offered a few notes and then minded its own business. In the quiet, the house took a deeper breath, the kind that turns shelter into sanctuary. The morning woke soft and gold. The kind of light that forgives kitchens for last night's dishes and gives tired people one more chance. Pancakes happened because they had promised they would, and promises to children are the scaffolding of a house. Ava stirred with the authority of a sous chef. Junie patrolled the sprinkle situation like a customs agent for Joy, and Pearl appointed herself in charge of taste-testing blueberries, a role requiring both rigor and integrity. Caleb flipped the skillet with a flourish that earned applause. Nora cut small moons of butter and watched the way sunlight collected in the curls at the nape of each girl's neck. Ordinary is holy when you've gone hungry for it. After breakfast and an expedition to the library where 3 cards were stamped with names that belonged to them as if they had only just deserved them, they walked to the park. The air had that crisp brightness of late autumn, the sky a polished blue bowl, the trees practicing their goodbyes one leaf at a time. The triplets ran ahead, small comets trailing laughter. Caleb slowed as they approached a weathered bench tucked under a maple. He touched its back like a person greeting a friend. "She used to come here," he said quietly, his eyes on the grain of the wood. "When Eliza was pregnant and everything felt like too much and not enough, we'd sit on this bench and pretend the whole world was this rectangle of shade." He smiled, small and true. "We had a beagle then." He shed like it was a vocation. Nora sank onto the bench beside him, hands folded in her lap, the library book bag at her feet still warm from their walk. The girls took turns conquering the slide, shrieking as if joy required volume to be believed. "You can tell me more," she said, and what she meant was, "I can hold it." She loved daisies, he said. She said they looked like optimism that had learned to stand on its own. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out 3 small white blossoms with sunny centers. "Ava spotted a patch in the yard this morning. We thought we might bring them." Nora took the daisies, feeling the weight of their lightness. "Then we should go where daisies belong," she said, though her throat had tightened and she knew what he meant, and it terrified her with how right it felt to be invited. They dropped the girls with Mrs. Whitaker, the elderly neighbor who collected stray cats and neighborhood secrets and kept both safe. "Only an hour," Caleb told her, and Mrs. Whitaker waved him off like time was something she had in jars. The car ride to the cemetery was quiet in the way of 2 people rehearsing a grace they hoped to perform. The cemetery surprised Nora with its gentleness, a slope of green, stones like careful handwriting, trees that offered shade without sermon. Eliza Hart Mercer. The letters were carved without flourish. "Beloved wife and mother, a light we still follow." Someone had left a smooth stone atop the headstone, as if to hold down a memory in high wind. Nora knelt, the way you kneel when you mean to be small on purpose. She laid the daisies with deliberation, arranging them so the petals faced the sky. Her fingers traced the grooves of the letters the way one reads a name in Braille. "I'm sorry," she whispered, and it was not a performance nor a plea, but the steady saying of a truth too long crated in her chest. "I didn't know it was you. I didn't know it was this story I was stepping into, but I know now, and I will love them the way you loved them, fiercely, softly, with more attention than advice. That's my promise." She stayed there long enough for quiet to turn from stranger to companion. When she lifted her head, Caleb was standing a pace back, giving space the kind of respect that makes space generous. He came forward and sat beside her on the grass. "I never told anyone," he said, voice low, the way people speak in museums and at oceans. "But the last time we spoke, she asked me for something. Not a replacement, not a hero. She said if she couldn't walk every mile with us, she hoped I'd find someone kind, someone who sees whole stories, not just sad chapters." He smiled without looking at Nora, the kind of smile people make when they've just recognized something they've been looking at for a long time. Kind was the word, not perfect. Nora felt the sentence loosen a knot inside her that she hadn't been able to name, the knot that tied guilt to identity. "I'm not the next person," she said, and the sentence walked carefully out of her. "Or if I am, it doesn't feel like I'm standing in someone's place. It feels like I'm joining a table that already has a chair for me." Caleb reached into his coat again and pulled out something small, faded, fragile. It was a bracelet made from thin pink ribbon threaded through 2 mismatched buttons. One button had been worried by fingers until its paint chipped. On its surface, In black marker still shiny at the edges were the letters NNH, written wobbly in a child's determined hand. "They made this the day you stayed," he said. "They called it your mommy band and staged a ceremony requiring I present it to you with snacks as witnesses." Junie insisted on the initials. Ava chose the ribbon. Pearl said the buttons should be different so it would be easy to tell it was real. He lifted Nora's wrist like a promise and tied the ribbon with the care of someone binding a book. "It's not gold," he said, "but it's ours." Nora looked at the bracelet and then at him, and for once the world didn't divide into before and after. It stayed whole. "I will fail," she said, "because truth told early can save you later. I will be tired and say the wrong thing and forget it's library day and buy the wrong kind of yogurt. I can't be a miracle." "I don't want a miracle," he answered. "I want a person who keeps coming back. I want kind." He slid his palm against her cheek for 1 second. A touch simple enough to be overlooked and therefore impossible to forget. "And that," he added, "you already are." They sat there until the afternoon softened and a breeze lifted, carrying a whisper from the leaves like someone practicing gratitude. Before they left, Nora touched the handkerchief in her pocket, the cream one with Eliza's initials that Caleb had loaned her at the bus stop and somehow never asked to have returned, and pressed it briefly to the daisies. "Thank you," she murmured again, to Eliza, to the strange arithmetic of their lives, to the part of herself that had kept hoping even when she had talked like she hadn't. On the drive home, the road flashed with small autumns, the brief announcement of each front yard. When they turned onto their street, the oak in the backyard leaned into the blue, offering the afternoon some dignity. Mrs. Whitaker waved from her porch with the benevolence of someone who believes love is the neighborhood watch. Inside the house, 3 girls had built a kingdom of blocks and blankets. "We made a castle," Ava reported. "But the dragon is friendly," Junie added sternly, as if rumors had circulated to the contrary. Pearl touched Nora's wrist and found the ribbon. Her face lit with the kind of pride children feel when the adults agree to live inside their imaginations. "You kept it," she whispered. "Good." The rest of the day arranged itself without force. There was macaroni and cheese that didn't apologize for being exactly what it was, and a drawing session in which everyone had to include at least 1 daisy and 1 star. Caleb dug out a box of old photos and gave the girls the ones of the beagle to paste into a scrapbook labeled, at Ava's insistence, "Our history so far." Nora printed 3 pictures from her phone. The first night on the couch with 3 sleeping crowns, the gold star she had placed on the frame of Eliza's photo, the bracelet tied at her wrist. Artifacts, she told them, and they agreed the word had weight. When bedtime came, they did bedtime. Routine is a raft in the busy river. Teeth, hair, stories. Tonight, Pearl asked for the cloud book again, but Nora paused halfway and switched to a different tale. A quiet story about a lighthouse that thought it was only there to warn of rocks, but discovered it could also help ships find their way home by recognizing their names. "How do lighthouses learn names?" Ava asked, sincere as weather. "By listening," Nora said. "By shining where people can see." The 3 sets of eyelashes lowered in stages, the choreography perfected by weeks of practice. "Will the bracelet be there when we wake up?" Junie asked, sleep tugging at her voice. "Yes," Nora said. "And waffles, if pancakes get shy." On the way out, Nora and Caleb stood for a minute in the dim hall because good minutes shouldn't be rushed. "Tomorrow," he said, "I want to take you somewhere else. If you're willing to be surprised and also very, very not surprised." She lifted an eyebrow, inviting the riddle to explain itself. He grinned, sheepish. "It's our backyard," he admitted. "A surprise of the most predictable kind." "Predictable is my favorite kind," she said. "It means we planned it and still want it." After the girls fell into the deep sleep of the well-loved, they sat under the oak with mugs that steamed like fresh ideas. The night settled around them without argument. Fireflies stitched their brief messages, and somewhere a neighbor's radio found an old song and let it wash over the fences as if music could be a public utility. Caleb turned the empty ring box in his hands, the tiny white one he had brought out earlier to hide a gift that wasn't a ring. He opened it to reveal a cupcake, carefully frosted, a pink ribbon tucked into the swirl like a flag. "This is not a proposal," he said, the corner of his mouth betraying him. This is a prelude. Nora laughed, that warm, low laugh that had first settled the girls and now settled him. You're allowed to practice, she said. So am I. She looked up through the leaves at a slice of sky and felt for the first time in years the absence of dread. It wasn't happiness exactly, not the shiny kind. It was steadiness. It was a chair pulled out for her at a table she hadn't dared admit she wanted. She laced her fingers with his. The bracelet brushed his knuckle. The oak above them tallied another night survived and chose to call it grace. Inside, on the mantle, the photograph of Eliza watched without judgment, the gold star catching lamplight like a wink. On the kitchen table, the library books lay in a neat stack, due dates tucked between pages like small, patient futures. Tomorrow would be their backyard, and daisies, and 3 small queens of pink learning that sometimes the safest place to be brave is at home. The backyard looked like a secret the wind had decided to keep. Paper chains looped from branch to branch as if the oak had been crowned by laughter. Construction paper pennants fluttered like polite birds. In the far corner, a square of new earth held a small daisy bush, its white faces still shy but already practicing brightness. Ava, Junie, and Pearl had changed twice and finally settled on 3 shades of pink they declared essential to matrimony. Rose, blush, and Princess Strawberry, a color Junie insisted was real because she could feel it. Nora stood barefoot in the grass, her dress simple and white, the kind that looked like it had been stitched out of mourning. She had tucked the pipe cleaner crown into her updo the girls called a cloud bun. It wobbled exactly enough to tell the truth. Caleb walked out carrying a small white box, not toward her at first, but down into the grass with the girls. He crossed his legs, surrendered his height, and smiled like he was about to give a presentation and had finally thrown away his note cards. The triplets folded around him, expectant and solemn, in the way children are when they can tell adults have remembered how to be tender in public. "Team Mercer?" he said. "Team Mercer," they echoed, and the sound of it stitched the air. He opened the box. Inside sat a cupcake, white frosting spiraled like a tiny galaxy, a pink ribbon tucked into the swirl. Anchored to the ribbon, delicate as a secret, a ring gleamed, a circle plain enough to never feel like a performance. He looked up at Nora from the grass, ring still nested in sugar as if sweetness could be a witness. "I could kneel," he said, grinning at the obvious, "but this is how we live, all of us on the ground together." Ava whispered, "Say the words," which made Junie hop with anticipation and Pearl cover her mouth to keep all the happy from escaping too fast. Caleb breathed once, as if putting a bookmark in his life. "Nora Hale," he said, "you taught us the language for the inside of feelings and the outside of days. You turned routine into shelter and grief into a place where new things grow. Will you marry me and keep choosing us when mornings are loud and nights remember to hurt?" The question unfurled into the afternoon and hung there like a banner no wind could tangle. Nora felt her throat catch and then ease. She stepped forward and knelt too, because proximity was part of the answer. "I already said yes," she told him softly, touching the ribbon on her wrist where the mismatched buttons pressed the skin into a memory. "I said it the first time they fell asleep on my shoulder, and my heart didn't try to run." She slid the ring free from frosting, laughing through tears when Junie declared the frosting now holy. Caleb took Nora's hand and set the circle where it would live. His hands shook in the honest way. The triplets erupted into a dance that looked exactly like gratitude with elbows. Ms. Whitaker shuffled through the gate with a clipboard and the confidence of a woman who had officiated more block party disputes than any court. She wore a cardigan the color of tea and pearls that remembered better eras. "All right, my loves," she announced, setting herself beneath the oak as if it had deputized her. "By the powers vested in me by no one but common sense, neighborly love, and the state's legitimate paperwork waiting inside, we are going to do this right." She nodded to each girl. "Flower queens at the ready?" They processed down an aisle of grass in uneven steps, scattering daisy petals with studied concentration. The petals lifted and fell, soft punctuation to their joy. Nora met Caleb at the arbor Ava and Pearl had convinced the backyard to be. Up close, his eyes had that ocean look. Surface calm, depth obvious to anyone who had ever swum. He took her hands. "I don't need vows I can't keep," he said, words measured, true. "I vow to cook breakfast badly and try again, to say I'm sorry the first time and not after an argument's third lap, to remind you on the hard days that the oak keeps standing, and so do we." Nora answered without reaching for a flourish she didn't need. "I vow to listen even when the house is noisy, to name the feeling before we try to fix it, to sit at the foot of a bed until the question can be small enough to sleep. I vow to keep showing up, not as a miracle, but as myself. Kind, present, here." Mrs. Whitaker sniffed, composed herself by pretending to adjust her clipboard, and then looked at the girls. "Do the sovereign flower queens consent to this alliance?" she asked, as if signing a treaty. "We do," Ava said, steady. "We really do," Junie added, extra. "We already did," Pearl whispered, and the whisper felt like a blessing. "Then," Mrs. Whitaker proclaimed, "by the old oak, by neighbors who water your plants when you forget, by the memory of love that came before, and by the love I can see standing right here, I pronounce you married. You may kiss in front of children if you keep it rated G." They kissed like people who knew kissing could be a promise and also a relief. The girls squealed and threw handfuls of petals straight up into the truth. Laughter braided the air. There was no string quartet, but somewhere down the block, a radio found a melody that wandered into the yard at exactly the right moment and pretended to be hired. Lemonade poured into mason jars. Cookies appeared as if conjured by gratitude. Mrs. Whitaker signed the certificate with a flourish that made bureaucracy look like a cousin of art. After the congratulations thinned into quiet industry, they planted the daisy bush properly, each hand small or large, patting soil as if tucking in a child. "So Mommy Eliza can see," Pearl murmured, and Nora's hand found her shoulder. "So all of us can," she said. The gold star on Eliza's photo inside the house caught a thread of sun through the window and flashed once, a tiny semaphore for those who were looking. Twilight drew its gentle line through the yard, and a soft coolness encouraged everyone into the kind of closeness that keeps memory. They gathered under the oak, Caleb with Pearl asleep across his chest, Nora with Ava's head against her shoulder and Junie's feet pressing her thigh in time with some private music. The new ring warmed to her skin as if metal could learn the body's weather. The bracelet ribbon tickled her wrist in the breeze. 2 vows, 1 circle, this silly crown, she thought. Enough. "Will you still be here when we get big?" Ava asked, voice muffled by cotton and hope. Nora kissed the top of her head and answered with a clarity that would not scare away in the morning. "I'll be here. Not perfect, not always polished, but here's where I'll be." Junie, nearly asleep, negotiated from habit. "If pancakes get scared, we make waffles," Nora finished, and Junie's mouth smiled its agreement even as it fell slack. Caleb's free hand found Nora's on the blanket, fingers interlacing with the ordinary grace of people who have stopped rehearsing how to hold on. He looked at her not as if asking a question or making a case, but as if acknowledging an arrival. "We're a lot," he said, half apology, half pride. "We're enough," she answered, and the words settled into both of them with the certainty of stones in a pocket. Later, when the girls were in their beds and the house had closed its eyes, Nora and Caleb stood again in the doorway of the room where crowns were everywhere but heavy on no one. "Do we tell them that love used to break here?" Nora asked, not afraid of the answer, only wanting it to be honest whenever it came. "We show them," Caleb said, his voice low and sure. "We show them love breaks and mends and keeps building around the cracks until the cracks are part of the design." He kissed her forehead, a benediction for the caretaker who had finally been cared for. On the mantel, the photograph of Eliza held its place with the gold star. The handkerchief had been cleaned and pressed and folded beside it, initials bright again. Not an absence, but a thread. Nora touched the frame with 2 fingers as she passed, the way she had the first night she decided not to run. "Thank you," she whispered. Not for permission, not for absolution, but for the map. Kindness, not perfection, that had led her to this room. When they stepped back out into the yard, the oak said nothing, and the night agreed to keep the secret it already knew. Family isn't a single door you come through once, but a series of thresholds you choose over and over, even in the dark. Fireflies stitched short messages between blades of grass, urgent and beautiful and brief. The daisy bush lifted its faces to the cooling air. Somewhere a wind chime took one small breath and let it go. The house, this particular geometry of hearts and walls, settled into its new name. Home, it said, in a language that sounded like 3 small snores, a low chuckle, and a woman's quiet exhale that finally didn't sound like bracing. And if anyone in the neighborhood had stood still and listened, they might have heard, under the hum of distant traffic and the hush of leaves, the soft, steady promise that had taken the long way here. We stay.